They said the bodies were found without skin, and that alone was enough to keep most people inside after dark. But what made it worse was how clean. It was not torn, not ripped, not the work of teeth or claws, but removed entirely, as if someone had taken the time to strip it away piece by piece, and when Ronan Raven entered the village, the silence told him more than the words did. Doors closed, windows covered no movement in the streets, even though the sun had not yet set. And when one of them finally spoke, it was only to point him toward the old mill at the edge of the river, where the first body had been found, laid out flat on the wood, with nothing left but muscle and bone. And Ronan did not ask questions. He did not need to. He had seen enough to know that anything that worked like this did not hunt randomly. It chose its place, its method, and it returned to it. Again and again, he moved through the empty streets without hesitation, his boots echoing faintly against the worn stone as the smell reached him before the mill came into view. Not rot, not decay, but something sharper, something wrong like heated metal mixed with flesh. And when he stepped inside the structure, the source of it became clear. The floor marked with dark stains that had soaked into the wood long before they had been noticed. The tools scattered around the space, not arranged, not used with care, but present, in a way that suggested they had been taken and discarded rather than chosen. And at the center of it all lay the remains of the body they had spoken of, the form intact in shape, but stripped of everything that should have covered it. The muscle exposed the bone visible in places where it had been cut too close, and Ronan crouched beside it, his gaze steady as he examined the edges of the cuts, because that was where the truth always was, and what he saw confirmed it. This had not been done with precision, not by a blade, not by anything designed for the purpose. The edges were uneven in places, too smooth in others, as if whatever had done this had changed its method. Mid-process had adjusted as it worked, and that alone made it worse, because it meant this was not a practiced act. It was something learning, something improving. With each attempt, a faint sound came then from deeper within the mill, a slow, dragging noise followed by a soft, wet shift, as if something heavy moved across wood, and Ronan rose immediately, his hand moving to the hilt of his blade as he stepped toward it, because whatever had done this was still here, still working, and the structure around him creaked softly as the wind moved through the broken boards. But the sound he followed did not belong to that. It came from below, from the lower level, where the river passed beneath the mill, and when he reached the opening and looked down, he saw it. At first, only a shape, hunched near the water. Its back turned, its body moving in slow, uneven motions, as if it worked on something in front of it, and then it shifted slightly, and the light caught it just enough to reveal the truth. The skin that covered it was not its own, not whole, not natural, but layered pieces stretched across its frame in uneven patches, some fresh, some older, some already beginning to dry and crack at the edges. And as it moved, those layers shifted independently of each other, as if they had not yet settled into place. And the sound came again. The wet, dragging noise, followed by a sharp tearing motion, and Ronan stepped down into the lower level without hesitation. Because now he understood this was not just killing. This was transformation, something that took what it needed and used it to become something else, something new. And whatever it was, it had not finished. And as his boot touched the wood below, The creature stopped its movement completely, the silence snapping into place around them as it slowly began to turn, and Ronan Vorn tightened his grip on the blade, because whatever faced him now was not what had started this. It was what it had become after doing it again and again. And it was still changing. The creature did not rush him when it turned, and that alone made it worse, because anything that worked like this did not waste movement. It learned, it adjusted, it chose when to act, and Ronan held his ground as it faced him fully. Now the shape of it, clearer in the dim light from above its body, uneven, not just in form, but in texture. The layers of skin stretched across it, shifting slightly as it moved, each piece reacting differently, some tight, some loose, some already pulling away at the edges where they had not bonded. And beneath them the structure was wrong. Not human, not animal, but something in between, something that had been altered by repetition rather than design. And its head tilted slightly as if studying him, as if measuring the distance the same way he measured it. And then it moved one step forward. Slow, deliberate, the sound of its feet against the wood, damp and uneven. And Ronan stepped to the side in response, not retreating, not advancing, but forcing it to adjust, forcing it to track him. Because anything that relied on observation could be pushed into error if the pattern changed too quickly. And the creature followed immediately, its movement smoother than it should have been for something built like this. The layers of skin along its shoulders pulling tight as it shifted the tension, redistributing across its frame, as if those pieces served more than one purpose, not just covering, but reinforcing. And that told him enough. This thing was not just wearing what it took. It was using it, building itself into something stronger. With each layer, a faint tearing sound came from behind it. Then, and Ronan's gaze flicked briefly past its form to the shape on the floor near the water. What it had been working on. Before he arrived, another body not yet finished. The skin partially removed, the edges fresh. The work incomplete. And that confirmed it. The process was ongoing. It had not stopped to defend itself. It had stopped because something new had entered its space. Something it needed to assess before continuing. And that made it more dangerous because it meant the work mattered as much as the hunt. The creature took another step forward, then faster. This time not a rush, but a test. Its arm lifting slightly, the skin along it, stretching as it moved, and Ronan reacted instantly, stepping inside the motion before it could complete its strike. His blade cutting across the limb in a sharp, controlled arc, the steel biting through the outer layer and into what lay beneath. And the resistance was wrong. Not the give of flesh, not the hardness of bone, but something in between, something that shifted under pressure, and he pulled back immediately, creating space as the creature recoiled, its arm drawing inward as the cut opened, and something dark and thick seeped from beneath the layers. Not blood, not in the way it should have been, but something heavier, something that moved slower, as if it did not flow freely. And the creature reacted to it. Not in pain, but in correction. The surrounding skin tightening, pulling toward the wound, as if trying to close it to reinforce the damage. And Ronan saw it clearly. Then this thing did not just take skin. It used it to repair, to strengthen, to adapt in real time, and that meant every strike that did not end. It would only make it harder to kill. The creature moved again, then faster than before, its body adjusting to the damage, its movements sharper, more direct, as if it had learned something from the first exchange, and the arm he had cut came forward again, not weakened, but altered the layer over it. Thicker now, the edges pulled tighter as it struck toward him, and Ronan deflected it with the flat of his blade. The impact heavier than before the reinforcement, already changing the way it moved, and he stepped back, half a pace, resetting his stance, because now the fight had shifted from testing to adaptation. The creature closed the distance again, its other arm coming up in a second strike, aimed to catch him as he moved, and he turned into it, his blade cutting upward this time toward the neck, where the layers were thinner, where the structure beneath might still be vulnerable, and the steel bit deeper there, cutting through 2 layers before catching on something beneath. And the creature reacted instantly, its body twisting violently, the movement forcing him to pull the blade free before it could be trapped. And he stepped back again, his breathing steady, but his focus tightening, because now he understood this was not a creature that would weaken. As the fight continued, it would change, it would improve, it would become harder to cut, harder to break. With every moment it remained alive. The sound of water shifting beneath the mill echoed faintly then, and the creature's head turned slightly toward it, for just a fraction of a second, as if something there mattered, as if the process it had been performing was tied to that place. And Ronan marked it immediately, because anything that drew its attention away from the fight, even for a moment, was something he could use. The creature faced him again, then its posture lowering slightly, its movements more controlled, more deliberate, as the layers across its body settled into a more stable configuration. And Ronan Vorn adjusted his grip on the blade, because the next exchange would not be about testing anymore. This was where it began to use what it had learned, and whatever came next would not leave room for hesitation. The creature did not hesitate after that, and the change in it was immediate. The way it moved no longer testing, no longer adjusting in small ways, but committing fully to each motion as if it had already learned enough to act without restraint. And Ronan felt the shift the moment it closed the distance again, its arm striking faster than before, the reinforced layers pulling tight as it moved, and he turned into it, his blade deflecting the strike just enough to pass, while he stepped inside its reach, his own movement, tight controlled, aimed at the same point, along the neck where the layers were thinner and the steel cut again, deeper this time, splitting through multiple layers, before catching on something beneath that pulsed faintly, and he twisted hard, driving it further, and the creature convulsed in response, its entire body locking for a fraction of a second, before reacting violently, the surrounding layers shifting inward, as if trying to trap the blade, and Ronan ripped it free, immediately stepping back, as the creature lashed out, in a wide, uncontrolled arc, the force of it striking the wooden support beside him hard enough to crack it, the structure splintering under the impact, and that alone told him enough. The strength it carried was not natural, not bound by what it had once been. The layers were not just protection. They were reinforcement, adding to its power as much as its durability. The creature pressed forward again, its movement sharper now, more direct, its strikes overlapping in a pattern that forced him to keep moving, to keep adjusting. Because standing still, even for a moment, would mean being caught and held. And Ronan moved constantly, his blade deflecting, redirecting cutting only when the opening allowed, because anything less would leave him exposed, and the space around them began to matter more with each step. The lower level of the mill, narrow the water channel, running along one side, limiting movement, the wooden supports breaking the space into uneven sections, and the creature used it instinctively, driving him toward the tighter area, where escape would be harder, where its reach would control more of the space. And Ronan shifted against it, stepping back toward the edge of the water, instead forcing it to follow, forcing it to commit its weight to ground. That was less stable because anything that relied on structure could be disrupted if the foundation beneath it changed, and the creature stepped forward without hesitation, its foot striking the damp wood near the edge. And for a moment, the balance shifted slightly, not enough to stagger it, but enough to change the angle of its next strike. And that was when Ronan saw it. Not in the layers, not in the movement, but in what lay beneath the skin along its side, where the patches had not yet fully aligned, where the structure beneath was still exposed in small sections. And there the surface moved differently, not like muscle, not like bone, but like something else, something that pulsed slower, deeper, as if it were the source of everything else, the point where the layers connected to the core that drove them. And the realization settled immediately. This thing was not the layers it wore. Those were tools, extensions. What mattered was what lay beneath them, the core that controlled how they moved, how they adapted. And if that could be reached, if that could be destroyed, the rest would fail, no matter how much skin it carried. The creature lunged again, then faster. Now its movement more aggressive, as if it had sensed the same thing, as if it understood the threat he posed. And Ronan did not step back. This time, he stepped in, closing the distance completely, his blade coming up in a tight, controlled motion aimed directly at that exposed section. And the steel struck deep, cutting through the outer layers and into that pulsing structure beneath. And the reaction was immediate, violent, the creature convulsing its body, twisting in a way that forced the surrounding layers to shift out of alignment, the reinforcement breaking for a fraction of a second. And Ronan held the blade there, just long enough to feel the change before pulling it free and stepping back, because he knew it would not end with one strike. Not here. Not yet. The creature recovered quickly, though faster than it should have, the layers pulling tight again, the gaps closing as it reinforced itself, the exposed section already beginning to disappear beneath new layers drawn from its own surface. And that confirmed the second truth. This thing did not just adapt, it repaired itself, using what it already had, reshaping its body in response to damage, and that meant time worked against him. The longer the fight lasted, the harder it would become to reach that core. Again the creature advanced once more, its posture lower, now its movements more controlled, as if it had shifted from aggression to precision, its strikes coming in tighter arcs, aimed not just to hit, but to limit his movement, to force him into a position where he could not reach the same point again. And Ronan felt the pressure building the space, narrowing the options, shrinking, as the creature adapted to every exchange, and the sound of water moving beneath them grew louder, as if something in the flow had changed, as if the structure of the mill itself had begun to shift under the strain of the fight. and Ronan Vorn adjusted his stance, lowering his center of gravity, his grip tightening on the blade, because now he understood everything he needed. This would not be won by cutting through what it had become. It would only end when he reached the core beneath the layers and destroyed the thing that allowed it to keep changing. And the next moment would be the only chance he had to do it, before it closed that weakness completely and became something he could no longer break. Ronan did not wait for the creature to close that weakness completely, because he had already seen how quickly it adapted, how each moment it remained standing made it harder to reach what lay beneath the layers, and he stepped forward before it could settle its structure again, forcing the distance closed in a single decisive motion, his blade low, his posture open enough to draw its attention away from the exposed section, and the creature reacted instantly. Its arm striking in a tight controlled arc, aimed to intercept him before he could reach it. The reinforced layers pulling tight along the limb as it moved, and Ronan turned into it at the last possible moment, letting the strike glance past him close enough to tear through his sleeve as he drove forward, inside its reach, the impact of it, grazing flesh sharp, but not enough to slow him, and his blade came up from below in a precise upward thrust, aimed directly into the exposed section along its side, where the layers had not yet fully aligned. And this time, he did not stop when resistance came. He forced the steel deeper, pushing through the outer layers, through the shifting reinforcement, and into the pulsing core beneath. And the reaction was immediate and violent. The creature's entire body, convulsing, the layers around the wound collapsing inward as if trying to close around the blade to trap it. But Ronan held his ground, stepping closer, forcing it deeper, still ignoring the way the surrounding skin shifted and pulled against him. Because if he let go now, it would not end. It would recover. It would seal that weakness, and the chance would be gone. So he twisted the blade hard, driving it further into that core. And something gave, not gradually, not partially, but completely. The pulsing beneath the surface, breaking the movement, collapsing, as the force that held the layers together failed, and the creature lashed out blindly, its limbs striking in wide, uncontrolled arcs, the reinforcement gone, the precision lost, as the structure began to fail from within, and Ronan ripped the blade free, stepping back, just as the creature staggered, its body losing cohesion, the layers slipping out of alignment, no longer held by anything that mattered, the pieces of skin that had once formed its outer surface, sagging and tearing away. As the structure beneath collapsed, and it fell heavily to the wooden floor, the impact shaking the weakened supports around them, the entire lower level groaning under the sudden shift in weight. And for a moment, it still moved, small, uneven motions, running through the remains, as if something inside tried to hold on, but there was nothing left to sustain it. The core destroyed, the connection broken, and the layers that had made it something more were nothing without it. And the movement stopped, completely. The body going still, the unnatural shape collapsing into nothing more than what it had been built from, and the silence that followed was broken only by the slow creaking of the mill as the damaged supports strained under the weight of the structure above. And Ronan stepped back again, his breathing steady, despite the blood that ran down his arm, his gaze fixed on the remains, because he needed to be certain, needed to see that it would not rise again. And when it did not, he turned away from it, as the wood beneath his feet shifted slightly. The damage from the fight spreading through the structure, and he moved toward the stairs without hesitation, because this place would not hold much longer. The mill groaning louder, now the supports cracking under the strain as the balance of the building shifted. And when he reached the upper level, the air felt different, lighter, without the weight that had filled the space below, and he stepped out into the open, just as the structure behind him gave way. The sound of wood breaking echoing through the village as part of the mill collapsed into itself, the lower level sinking into the river, beneath taking with it what remained of the creature and the evidence of what it had been, and the water closed over it quickly, carrying away whatever was left. And Ronan Vaughan did not look back, because there was nothing left to hunt here, nothing that could rebuild itself without the core that had driven it. And as he walked back through the silent streets, the doors remained closed, the windows still covered. But the air had changed, the tension that had filled the place gone with whatever had been inside the mill. And for now, that was enough. The bodies would stop, the process would end, and whatever had begun, this would have to start again, somewhere else, if it ever did at all. And Ronan knew better than to believe it would not, because things like this did not come from nowhere. They were made, shaped by something deeper, something that would try again when the time was right, in a place where no one saw it coming until it was already too late.